Hello, and welcome to my presentation on tribal issues in emergency management. In order to understand the differences in emergency management in the tribal sense, it is important to know why there's a difference between emergency management in tribal communities and emergency management in cities, municipalities, and counties. There are approximately 562 Native American tribes across the United States. In a series of opinions in the 1800s, the United States Supreme Court ruled that the lands occupied by Indian tribes were independent from the state's control. This is because, as the court mentioned, their authority derived from their pre-existing status as sovereign. According to the court, the states have no authority over Indian affairs unless authorized explicitly by Congress. This means that individuals that reside on tribal lands are bound only to the laws of the tribe and not those of surrounding governments. In the field of emergency management, this would mean that tribes, just like states, would have the authority to petition the federal government directly for assistance. It is as if the tribes are on the same level as the states. As you can imagine, the separation of powers, so to speak, can complicate the relations between some tribes and governments. The distinction between the two entities is especially important in the field of emergency management. As our textbook explains, tribal governments respond to the same range of emergencies and disasters that other jurisdictions face. This means that whatever the disaster, the same emergency management principles of saving lives and stabilizing the incident and preserving property exist on tribal lands just as they would in local jurisdictions. However, the process of receiving assistance from other governments is slightly different. Whereas a local city manager would assess the situation, see what local capabilities are, ask for state assistance, and from there federal assistance, on a tribal reservation, the local emergency manager is called the Tribal Chief Executive Officer and is responsible for the public safety and welfare of the people of that tribe. Just like a local emergency manager, the Tribal Chief Executive Officer coordinates tribal resources to prevent, prepare for, respond to, and recover from disasters. They are given the authority to suspend tribal laws and ordinances, as well as create new laws such as nightly curfews. Perhaps one of the Tribal Chief Executive Officer's most important jobs is to play a key role in providing leadership and communicating to the tribal nation. They are responsible for helping people, businesses, and organizations cope with the consequences of any disaster. For example, let's say there was a major hurricane that affected a relatively large portion of the tribal community in the Tampa Bay area. Just as the city emergency manager would inform the people of Tampa about assistance being provided and the locations of shelters, the Tribal Chief Executive Officer would provide the same information to those on tribal lands. Another very important function of the Tribal Chief Executive Officer is that they are the ones who negotiate and enter into mutual aid agreements with other tribes or jurisdictions in order to share resources. Just as a city emergency manager would work together to provide assistance to each other in the event of an emergency, it is important that the Tribal Chief Executive Officer take part in these negotiations. They are the individuals who are given the responsibility of seeking assistance from local, state, or federal governments when needed. It is important to note, however, that when requesting assistance under the Stafford Act, the state governor must request a presidential disaster on behalf of the tribe. This is when fostering good relations with surrounding governments and agencies becomes so important. As you can see, the differences between a Tribal Chief Executive Officer and a city, municipality, or county emergency manager are relatively small. Both are tasked with the job of keeping the people of their community informed and safe in the event of a disaster. But it is of great importance to remember that their differences have overwhelming national implications, and that the United States Supreme Court has drawn a definite line in the sand with their decision of tribal sovereignty. What this means is that it is especially important for cities, municipalities, counties, and states to work closely with tribal chief executive officers and other tribal leaders in order to most effectively help the victims of any disaster. Thank you for watching my presentation. I hope you have enjoyed learning the importance of tribal relations and emergency management.